Today we're going to go over what happens if you get into a multiple offer situation and what kind of offers are actually going to be the best kind of offers to write and the best kind of offers to accept. What I mean by that is there's a misconception out there that the highest priced offer is going to be the best offer for a buyer to write and for a seller to accept. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. And that's not the case for several different reasons. We're going to go over some of the most obvious ones, which is going to be the pricing structure of a contract. So if we're going to work with the number 200,000 in all of these different scenarios as the baseline, that's going to be the list price that we're working with, and those or these scenarios I'm going to be talking about are going to be based off 200,000. Took me a minute, but I kind of got there. All right, just bear with me. I might be forgetting a little bit here for whatever reason, but I do know what I'm talking about. So you're going to want to listen. All right, so you got an offer of 200,000, right? Let's say that's the first offer to come in. Someone is offering you 200,000, and we're going to say it's a clean offer. And what I mean by a clean offer, I'm talking about not asking for closing cost. We're going short on the tax prorations, which here in our area, because we're so close to Dayton, is kind of a topic of whether you should go long or short. Not going to explain the nitty gritty here. Long tax proration is better for the buyer because they'll get a larger credit from the seller. Short tax proration is better from the seller because they will issue a smaller property tax proration to the buyer. So that's the skinny, right? Short, less money being deducted from the seller. Long, more money goes to the buyer. Okay, so when we say a clean offer, we're saying we're not going to ask for the home warranty. We're not going to ask for closing costs. We're going to go short tax proration. We're not getting anything else. We're not asking for any types of credits or anything like that. We are simply giving the seller what it is that they're asking for. In this scenario, we're going to give them $200,000. Now, second offer comes in. This buyer is going to need a closing cost credit. So they're going to ask the seller to help them offset the cost of their closing fees from the title and their escrow and the bank fees. And let's say those are about $10,000. So the seller is going to receive an offer of $210,000, but then they're going to ask, or the buyer is going to ask that the seller pays $10,000 of their closing cost. So we have our original offer of $200,000. Now we have an offer of $210,000, but now they're asking you to bring $10,000 to help the buyer out with some of their out-of-pocket expenses on the day of closing. So now you have two offers of $200,000. Not a big deal, right? You could pick either one. Maybe, probably not. Here's why. You got to remember, if financing is involved, which typically if they're asking for assistance on their closing cost, financing will be a hurdle you're going to have to get over. More specifically, you're going to have to get over the appraisal process. So if you're a seller and you're going to get $200,000 either way, why try to have to hit a higher number to get the same amount of money? You're just going to take the offer of $200,000. Now, for all of you buyers out there who are already experienced in having your offer rejected because you keep asking for closing costs, sorry to break it to you, but that is kind of the case right now. It's starting to alleviate a little bit, at least in our market. So you are getting better and more opportunities to ask for those closing costs. But unfortunately, the way it's been just for the last year, 2 years, it's been really hard to get some closing costs. Now, there are programs out there offered through various different types of lending programs, municipalities, things like that. There's grants, different types of assistance that can help you overcome that. So I would suggest looking into that, whether it's down payment or closing cost assistance. It doesn't matter because whatever money you had saved up for the other, you would just use for the remainder. So keep that in mind. A higher offer asking for money back is not as good as a lower offer that's just straight to the point. Now, it can go beyond the closing cost, right? I had mentioned the property taxes. Maybe you offer $203,000, but then you go long tax proration versus short. So that same $200,000 offer could still be better than $203,000 if you're still trying to get a little bit of a credit on the tax prorations there. If you're trying to squeak in a long pro versus a short proration, it could cost you if you're dealing with a good listing agent who's going to throw every single offer into an Excel sheet and make sure they're going over everything, including the closing date. I mean, you got to think every additional day of closing is going to cost the seller 1 day of property taxes, 1 day of homeowners insurance. There's going to be carrying costs, and all that needs to be factored into whether or not one offer is going to financially benefit the seller more. I think we're starting to understand, and maybe you can appreciate that picture of just because you offer higher and then immediately try to get something else, how that's actually not going to be that helpful. Now, if there's no other offers on the table and you'd prefer to have that assistance, by all means, go for it. If you're the only one on there, they want a deal, so go for it. But if you're in a multiple offer situation, you need to make it as clean as possible, because aside from that whole number shift, the other thing to consider here is the appraisal. You know, if you're going to get the same amount, so if our price is up here and down here, but they both will equal $200,000 in the end, what you got to realize is an appraiser's got to come up with this additional value. And all you're really doing is stuffing your closing cost in there. And that stuff does get taken into consideration from an appraisal standpoint, but just look at it from the seller's point of view. Would you want to have to hit a higher number just to get the same net back to you? Probably not. Why risk it? Because what if it only appraises at the 200 and now you got to still pay their closing cost? Ooh, you're losing a little bit of money there. It just wouldn't make sense. Or even worse, what if it appraises for less and then they still need the closing costs? All of a sudden, it's a really bad situation for the sellers. So buyers, I hope you can appreciate and understand why those kinds of offers are often overlooked when there's a very nice, clean, full ask, over list, whatever the case may be, type of price. Now, another thing to consider is you may have two very clean offers that both come in at $210,000, or maybe one comes in at $207 and the other one comes in at $210, but maybe that $207 has what we call an appraisal gap. That means, hey, if this doesn't appraise, I'm still going to cover that difference. Maybe not the whole thing, but I'm willing to cover the difference. And this person may be like, nah, I'll give you top dollar, but I'm not going to overpay. All you're really saying when you're in that type of situation as a buyer is like, hey, I'm going to offer to the moon, but I'm pretty sure we're going to run out of gas before we get there, so I'm actually hoping we'll settle down here. Whereas this person is saying, hey, we're going to the moon, and we're going to eat our cheese when we land because I'm buying this house. So the underlying features of a contract can make something more appealing. Now, this is all within reason, right? If you have someone offer $250,000, some person offer $300,000, and they're offering some type of appraisal gap, maybe it's not quite as much as this, you may be tempted to risk that and say, sure, I'll do a smaller appraisal gap, but man, it's so much higher. Maybe we'll still end up somewhere higher than this offer. Who knows? At the end of the day, the appraiser is going to be the one to come up with the price. We'll run our CMAs. We'll make our best educated guesses. But even an appraiser's report is going to state a very key word. It is an opinion of value. So we're not all going to have the same opinion here. And unfortunately, the appraisers is the only one that matters, unless you can restart the deal and then hopefully get a better appraiser, right? That was a joke to you appraisers. You're all great, except for the ones that don't appraise things. But and moving on. So from a price standpoint, I think it's I kind of painted the picture and I've explained fairly well that just because you have the highest priced offer doesn't mean you have the highest net offer to the seller. So keep that in mind. Make sure you're working with a very skilled buyer's agent who understands this and can try to get a jump. Now, here's another thing. Sometimes the highest net offer is not necessarily the best offer for a seller. And what I mean by that is maybe they're building a home and they want to be able to stay in their house for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. I think the longest one I've ever done is 2 months, where they wanted to sell the home, occupy the home, and the buyer just had to patiently wait. There's a lot of risk involved. Things can go wrong. Things can become very frustrating on both sides of those types of deals. But more often than not, they do turn out well. Just so happens, like the last 2 out of 3 that I've helped my buyers with, it did not go as smoothly as we would have hoped. So, but a buyer who's willing to engage in that type of transaction will have an advantage if that's more important or as important with how much the seller is going to net on their home. So there's occupancy things. Maybe they want extra long contracts because they don't actually want to close on this house unless they can find a house, and they want to know how much it's going to appraise for. So there are different variables outside of price that's going to be really important to some sellers. So the best thing you can do if you're a buyer's agent or if you're a buyer, make sure your buyer's agent is getting together with the sellers and listing agent to figure out, hey, what's important to you as the seller? Obviously, we're going to put together the best financial offer we can. Is there any type of dates, occupancy? What is it that we can do to help you really give our offers some strong consideration here over some of the other offers you're going to receive? So that's a really smart move if you're a buyer. So when they're asking for highest and best, understand what that means. That's why we're not asking for the highest offer. It's highest and best. It's got to be the highest priced with the best underlying features. Don't ask for home warranties. If you can, I don't recommend it, but if you're comfortable doing it, waiving home inspections, not asking for them to cover your title insurance, not asking for closing costs, trying to be as accommodating as possible with the occupancy. Those are all things you want to find out before you ever write the offer, so that right out of the gate, you'll be able to write the best and final offer that you can. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope it kind of explains why the highest priced offer is not the best offer necessarily. And if you like the content that we're putting out, if you can, just subscribe to the channel. My name is Jonas Helbert. I am the broker owner of Streetlight Realty. This is the Miami Valley Experience, where we cover and discuss all things real estate related. And from time to time, we'll also talk about events and restaurants and things that are going on within the entire Miami Valley. So we'd like it if you would subscribe.